Allah had just drifted off against my chest when my phone buzzed on the side table. I shifted carefully, not wanting to wake her. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. I braced for something shallow and routine, a reminder about formula, maybe, or another link to some European parenting article she thought I should study. Instead, I read 6 words that tore my life in two. We're moving to Barcelona. I emptied the account. Good luck. For a full minute, I didn't move. My body went numb before my mind caught up. When I finally opened the banking app, the shared family fund sat at 0, the same account we had all poured into. Mom, Dad, me, meant for emergencies, for shared care, for Brian's recovery. Every cent gone. No forwarding number. No postscript. Nothing. My breath came shallow and tight. Era stirred, her small fingers curling at my collarbone. She was warm, trusting, blissfully unaware that 2 people she would never remember had just made a choice that would alter her entire life. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thanks for the heads up." They hadn't even waited for the weekend to pass. I was only supposed to watch her while Brian recovered from a so-called breakdown in Berlin. No one had said how long it would be, or that it came bundled with vanishing acts and financial sabotage. But then again, nothing in my family ever arrived, with clear labels. I laid Era into her bassinet, cheeks still flushed from sleep, breath steady and soft. Then I walked to the kitchen, pulled out the paper files Mom always mocked me for keeping, and found the last bank statement. Just 2 weeks. Earlier, it had shown over $18,000. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I texted Brian. Read. No reply. My chest ached, not with panic but with recognition. Of course they'd do this. Of course I'd be the one left with the baby, the debt, the silence. The fridge hummed behind me as I leaned against the counter, staring at bottles, diapers, her tiny pink sleep sack warm in the laundry basket. Everything that once belonged to someone else was now mine by default. By morning, I would start mapping out Era's schedule, look into guardianship. But that night, I just sat beside her and watched her sleep, the weight pressing against my ribs, knowing deep down they weren't coming back. The truth is, I shouldn't have been surprised. Being the reliable one sneaks up on you. You don't notice the leash forming. It starts with picking up Brian from ballet because Mom had a deadline, even when I had my own commitments. It's folding Dad's shirts because Brian got distracted, only to watch her distraction turn into praise. I thought I was being helpful. That reliability made me valuable. Instead, it made me invisible. Brian was all fire and spectacle, crying in parking lots, scribbling poems on napkins, cycling through half-finished majors before settling on spiritual anthropology. People adored her chaos, called it luminous. My parents loved her like fragile crystal, even when she shattered everything she touched. Me? I was the shelf. The family fund, what they called the shared net, was built from Mom's side hustles, Dad's lecture stipends, and my freelance gigs. It began after Brian's second hospital stay, just in case someone else needed support. Someone else. Not Brian. Not again. Someone else. But I was never someone else. I was the backup system. The first time Brian drained it, she called it a transformative retreat in the Catskills. The second, a doomed move to Los Angeles to write a memoir she never started. They told me not to be so rigid about money, that Brian was becoming. Meanwhile, I patched gaps in my car insurance and went without new glasses for 2 years. And now, here we were. They had abandoned me with her daughter, cleaned out the account, and fled to Barcelona as though life here were just an overdue sabbatical. That silence after Mom's text wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. They never meant to return. Not to help, not to explain, not even to check in. I remembered Mom's last visit to this apartment. She frowned at my chipped mug, muttered, You still don't have matching dishes, and ignored the handmade tiles I'd installed in the bathroom, or the framed photos I'd restored for the Historical Society. Then she left without goodbye. That's who she was. That's who they all were. I was the quiet daughter, the steady one. And steady people in their eyes didn't need warning. But Era would. She would need more than my parents ever gave anyone. And I was the only one left to provide it. By the 4th day, my body functioned in jagged fragments. Era's sleep was an equation without logic. 3 40-minute naps, or one long cry from 2 to 4 a.m. Her lungs were fierce. My nerves were raw. I worked in scraps, editing footnotes for a regional history journal while she napped on a towel beside my laptop. The client had already emailed twice. I lied and said family emergency, though the words felt absurdly small. Every bottle was a negotiation. Every diaper a scramble. I bounced her until my arms throbbed, rocked her with podcasts, in my ears just to stay awake. Then, moments of grace, her gummy smile, pure oxygen. And then the screaming returned, and I felt myself dissolving into the wallpaper. Friends sent the occasional text, a meme, a check-in. No one came. I called Brian twice, left a voicemail, typed out a 3rd message demanding when she'd be back, but never sent it. What was the point? On Thursday morning, after pacing the floor all night with Era strapped to my chest, I opened the door for the mail. A warm Tupperware sat on the stoop with a note. You're doing more than enough. Across the hall, Mrs. Arusa's curtains shifted. Retired, alone, devoted to mystery novels, we'd only spoken once about trash pickup. That afternoon, she knocked softly and handed me a folded quilt. Made it for the wrong-sized bed, she said, voice even, no invitation implied. I thanked her. She didn't linger. It was the first time in days someone had truly seen me. That night, under the kitchen light, I held Era with one arm and ate reheated stew with the other. My body was heavy, my chest heavier still. But for the first time that week, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, I went searching for the old folder where my parents kept legal documents. I hadn't set foot in their house since the day they left. It smelled of lemon polish and arrogance. I told myself I was just there for the last container of formula, maybe an old bassinet in the attic. But I knew what I was really looking for. Proof. Or answers. Era dozed in her carrier as I opened drawers with deliberate hands. The fridge held nothing but fig jam and half a bottle of Prosecco. The cabinets were bare, scrubbed in that sterile way people clean when they don't plan on coming back. In the bottom drawer, under junk mail and a broken corkscrew, I found a green folder labeled Spain. Inside were itineraries dating back 6 months, flights, an apartment lease, Barcelona SIM cards already activated. This wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't emotional. It was engineered. Behind them, a notarized form. My name, my address, my signature lifted from an old lease. Power of E. Attorney for Quinn, age 6 months, transferred to me, indefinitely. They had made me her legal guardian without so much as a conversation. At the back of the folder lay a bank statement, $21,600 withdrawn, 2 weeks before they vanished. Destination, Meridian Trust, Private International Division, offshore. I sat at their kitchen table, once the stage for faculty dinners where they corrected my posture, and stared at the numbers. I should have been furious, should have wanted to break something. But all I felt was stillness. It wasn't a mistake. It was a trade. They had chosen freedom, and they had left me Era as their excuse. A new pan still sat on the counter. Price. Tag intact. $240 from a Portland boutique. They'd left that behind too. I folded the documents, slid them into my bag, and looked around one last time as though expecting voices to echo back. But the silence was unapologetic. Back in my apartment, I laid Era down, opened my laptop, and typed, "How to file for emergency guardianship in Virginia." The legal aid office was exactly what I expected. Sterile, overworked. The fluorescent lights hummed. The receptionist barely looked up from her keyboard. When Ephraim Rhodes walked in, tie a little off, sleeves pushed back, he greeted me like I was human, not just another file in his drawer. That alone nearly broke me. I laid everything out in front of him: the power of attorney, the bank statement, the travel itineraries. He read carefully, tapping the stack before he spoke. "They didn't notify you?" "No. They just left." His jaw tightened. "Then this isn't just a guardianship transfer. It may qualify as financial abandonment, possibly even fraud, depending on how the funds were handled." He explained that while the power of attorney was technically valid, the deception around it wasn't. If we could prove they had planned to shift responsibility without my consent or misused shared funds, we'd have grounds to challenge both custody and finances. I asked what that process would look like. He warned me it would be slow, uphill, tedious. I told him I'd already been climbing without sleep for weeks. One more mountain didn't scare me. That afternoon, I started cataloging everything. Receipts, screenshots, Brian's old texts asking me to cover for the weekend, and my mother's message about the money. I built a spreadsheet, printed copies, labeled folders. It felt obsessive, but also like I was stacking bricks into something solid. 2 days later, Brian finally called. I almost ignored it, but I wanted her voice recorded. "Danica," she said flatly, "you agreed to this." "No, I didn't. You asked me to cover for a weekend, not indefinitely." Silence. Then a laugh. Dry, condescending. "You're always dramatic. You think they abandoned you? Grow up. They're done carrying you." I steadied my voice. "They weren't carrying me. They were hiding behind me." "You're ridiculous," she snapped. "It's done. Your threats won't scare us." I let the quiet hang. She hung up. I saved the recording, backed it up twice. That night, Ira ran a mild fever. I held her against my chest, feeling her hot, uneven breaths while the streetlight pulsed against the ceiling. I didn't feel strong or victorious, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The next morning, I called Ephraim. "I've got something you need to hear." Then came the Sunday message, right as I was warming a bottle. "We're flying back. We want to see her." No apology, no explanation. Just a declaration, as if they were reclaiming luggage. I ignored it. 3 days later, they were at my door. Sandra swept in with her silk scarf. Talbot followed, sunglasses perched like a crown. They looked sunburned. Rested, the kind of rested only people without responsibility can afford. I opened the door just wide enough for their entitlement to hit the threshold. "You look tired," Sandra said, brushing past. "Still at that part-time job?" Talbot scanned the apartment, arms crossed. "We expected you to reach out. Guess parenting isn't for everyone." I stayed silent. Sandra moved to Era, who sat in her high chair, gumming banana. She clicked. Her tongue. "Her posture's off. You should be doing more tummy time." I turned fully. "I filed for full custody 3 weeks ago." They froze as I listed the documents. Bank transfers, forged power of attorney, failure to notify me of leaving the country, Brian's recordings. "Danica," Talbot said, jaw shifting. "No need to escalate." Sandra stepped forward. "Let's not make this ugly." "It already was," I said. "I just stopped pretending." Her eyes sharpened. That same cold calculation I grew up with. Talbot sighed like he was performing disappointment. "We'll go." Sandra turned back at the door. "You've always had a flair for melodrama. I didn't think you'd drag a baby into it." I didn't flinch. I shut the door gently and locked it. Era dropped her banana and clapped. That afternoon, Ephraim called. Our court date was moved up. The courtroom smelled like dust and polish, light too sharp overhead. Ephraim carried our binder like scripture. I sat beside him, watching the judge more than my parents. Sandra and Talbot arrived late. Brian didn't come. Ephraim began with the timeline: notarized documents, travel plans booked months earlier, account statements showing drained funds. Then the recordings, Brian's voice, dismissive, admitting I never agreed to guardianship. He handed the judge a transcript. Sandra cleared her throat. Talbot smirked. They didn't deny anything, only tried to spin it. My daughter exaggerates, Sandra said smoothly. She's under stress. Caring for a child that isn't hers is bound to overwhelm. The judge didn't blink. What concerns me isn't just the abandonment. It's the calculated way it was carried out. Miss Quinn was deceived and left without support. She paused, staring at my parents. Full custody is granted to Miss Quinn. The offshore account will be frozen pending review. Any visitation must be supervised and pre-approved. Sandra tried to speak. The judge raised her hand. We're finished. Outside, wind pressed against us. Sandra caught me on the steps. You were always jealous of Brian, she hissed. You just waited for a way to punish us for loving her more. Said nothing. She turned on her heel, Talbot trailing silently. In the lot, Era reached for me from Mrs. Alls's arms, giggling. That night, rocking her to sleep, I felt no relief. Just a hollow quiet, like the echo finally ended. The next morning, Ephraim's email came. Now the kiln hums low most mornings while Era plays on the quilt. The cradle I built sits near shelves of bowls. Sometimes she naps there, clutching the doll Mrs. Alls stitched. My hands are back in clay. Orders trickle in. The cafe restocked mugs. A college student commissioned a set. The studio opens 2 days a week, 3 when Era is settled. Mrs. Alls drops by Fridays with oatmeal cookies wrapped in wax paper, never staying long. Her presence is steady, the opposite of what I grew up with. Sometimes I still brace for a message, but months have passed, and silence has become livable. The account remains frozen. Brian hasn't reached out. I've stopped waiting. Last week, Era took 3 steps between the work table and the door before falling, laughing like it was a game. I laughed too, then cried later, alone in the kitchen. Not from sadness, but because I was the one who saw it. Yesterday I wrote Brian. Just 1 line. Era is safe. That's all that matters. No return address. This morning, I pressed my hands into damp clay, the cradle and the dented little bowl beside me, flour streaks from yesterday's toddler baking attempt still on the floor. They left me behind so they could escape. But I stayed, and I built.